Shane Cashman has shot down any semblance of credibility he has as a journalist as of this point.
Hey, this is Greg Hoyt from The Breakdown. If you're new here and checking out the channel on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, feel free to follow me on Twitter at GregHoytLET. Anyway, let's get on to the video.
Would you look at this? Look at this. You see this? You see how many pages this is? It's over 30 pages. Over 30 pages. Do you know what this is? This is a printout of the second installment of the purportedly 3-part series that Shane Cashman is doing on Eliza Bleu to, kind of help clear the air, to settle all the disputes, to address the criticisms that she's, had to face. But let me tell you, this in excess of 30 pages that Shane Cashman dropped on us, it gives us a whole lot of fluff. It gives us a whole lot of nothing except like more contradictions. And it shows that his ability to function and operate as anything remotely resembling a journalist, he just doesn't have it. This isn't journalism. It's not gonzo journalism. It's hot garbage, and it reads like some kind of weird, poorly written romance novel. So there are a number of issues with this piece, a number of contradictions, weird statements that Shane Cashman did when he injects himself into this story, weird statements from Eliza Bleu. I mean, there's just so much going on with this. So I'm going to rifle off what I find to be the most interesting / pathetic / contradictory, whatever you want to call it, label it what you want. So you remember in part 1 of Shane Cashman's report where Eliza Bleu was talking about how she thought her trafficker or one of her traffickers may be dead, but she didn't check on him? Well, after there were, a number of tweets showcasing she's made contradictory statements in the past, in this second installment, she talks about how she checked in on this alleged trafficker who cannot be named, and now he's magically alive. I thought maybe it's time for me to see if that is still alive, she said. In regard to the man who she said sold her for drug money in L.A., she asked a friend to Google the man's name. Find anything, I asked. He's still alive, she said. Why did you think he was dead, I asked. Because the drug use. If you give his name, do you promise not to put it in the article? I promised. Shane Cashman purportedly knows the name of this OG trafficker of Eliza's back in the late 90s or whatever, and he learns the name, and guess what? He won't print it because he wants to stay true to his source and all this stuff. And he kind of does this like little double speak thing, where in one sense he says the person isn't a household name, but then the fact that he's been cited as a musician by Eliza Bleu countless times, Shane Cashman then also says, like in the same breath in this article, that if people heard his music, they would recognize it. I stared at the photos of the man Eliza accused. I can't say he's a household name, but if and when this name does become public, I know many of you will recognize his music. And this long diatribe that Shane Cashman goes on regarding why he can't share the name also demonstrates why this is just such a piss-poor report. It's not even a report. Like I said, this is like a diary entry. This reads like a poor imitation of an Anne Rice novel where it's overly descriptive. He's a fiction writer. Google confirmed this. Shane Cashman is a fiction writer. So he can't even put together what should be a news report without making it freaking 30-some-odd pages and making it read like it's a novel and not actually something to factually digest. I was reluctant to share that I even know the name. I'll be called a liar. I'll be accused of the same trickery Eliza's been accused of. Despite my integrity getting picked apart in the digital coliseum for even attempting to write this story in the first place, I've gotten this far. I think by being as honest as I can with my readers. I have my flaws, as a man and as a writer, but I throw them on the page regardless. I am the prism through which you receive this side of the story, so it's only fair that I let you in on my deepest concerns, rather than putting on an air of objectivity. There is no objectivity in much of today's journalism. And so while Shane Cashman won't share the name of this alleged trafficker that Eliza told him about during his little excursion over at her family farm, he wants to ensure the readers that this person could be a trafficker, and they could be a real person, and they could have done what they did because they may have lived close to this woman at some point in the 90s. This new information for sure doesn't also prove trafficking. It shows me that Eliza and this man did seem to live in the same place at the same time. It shows me it is likely that Eliza and this man could have crossed paths, if even briefly. So apparently, living in proximity to Eliza Bleu or having lived in proximity to her in the past, hey, that person could have been trafficking them, because they lived near them. Like, I know he lends like the air of doubt and like, oh, there's no proof to this. But Shane Cashman still, if you read this entire piece, the whole 30 some odd pages of it, I'm telling you, he puts her up on a pedestal and basically treats her as though as her word is gospel, because Shane Cashman not only talked to Eliza, but talked to her mother and talked to her father briefly and talked to some friends of hers, which we'll get into that in a little bit. The dog barked and her mom turned to see what or who might be outside. Everyone was a bit on edge, awaiting some random person with a camera and a YouTube channel to show up and harass this family for the answers they wanted to hear. Again, with like this weird, goofy suspense novel that Shane Cashman needlessly inserted into this report. I mean, disregarding the fact that this report is just hot garbage for the position it tries to present. The fact that Shane Cashman made it all the more worse by just filling it in with this Billy Jack it makes it almost unreasonable. This report is like nearly 10,000 words. Every time I open Twitter, this is what people were tweet screaming into my brain. She's a fraud, a textbook narcissist, an irrefutable manipulative compulsive liar, an evil grifter, the Thanos of thoughts, a deceitful daughter of a dirty politician, a willing participant, fake victim, enthusiast, sick, the Ray Epps of feds, Elon's concubine, fame, clout chaser. All right, I gotta say, like the Thanos of thoughts, that's pretty funny. But outside of like the funny Thanos thing, there's Shane Cashman again inserting himself into the story, basically complaining about people were being critical of Eliza Bleu. And I don't know about any of you other guys, but I've yet to see anybody like compare Eliza Bleu to Ray Epps. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and check Twitter really quick to see if anybody's even mentioned that anywhere. Imagine my shock, another lie, because I can't find a tweet anywhere that refers to Eliza as the Ray Epps of feds. And when Shane Cashman isn't presenting this piece like it's some kind of suspense movie, he then diverts it to being like this weird kind of drama thing. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said as we stood outside her parents' house. "I detest writing under these conditions," I said. "It's not the end of the world," she said. "No offense to you, Shane, but I don't think it's so much about my story or clearing my name. My name's clear with God." For those who don't know, like, I've been a journalist for years. I've written under a myriad of conditions. And not once have I ever, like, felt to say, I can't write under these conditions. Like, the only time I ever felt like that is, like, I don't know, if I had too much to drink the night before and I'm hungover the next day and I got to do something. Yeah, I might be, like, internally saying, like, man, I detest writing under these conditions. But, like, this weird thing where Shane Cashman gets flown out to Eliza Bleu's farm to stay with her folks, and he's just doing, like, a little puff piece or a series of puff pieces, and he's, like, saying, I detest writing under these conditions. What a weenie. When she applied to be a cocktail server at a strip club in downtown Chicago, they asked her to audition to dance, and she did. She made sure to tell me that she willingly chose to start dancing. She got the job and soon after started drifting back into drinking. Imagine my shock. Eliza was a stripper. And while she was willingly stripping, she mentioned that on a couple of nights she made good money, but eventually she wasn't making money, and when she had to pay a house fee, the dancer fee, to perform at these clubs or whatever, this place in Chicago, she was getting, strapped for cash and needed some money. I stripped for 3 nights, and I made so much money that I eventually quit my other job. The dancers had to pay a house fee, regardless of how much they made a night. She was doing good until the winter came, and then the business died down for the season. So keep this in mind. Eliza was willingly stripping in Chicago in like the early 2010s, and she was bitching about not making enough money, and this is where the story segues into her somehow getting trafficked in Chicago by employing the most ambiguous of terms. "When do you meet the man you say trafficked you?" I asked. "Outside the strip club," she said. "And you won't name this guy either?" "It's not going to happen right now." "I have to ask why." "I can't," she said. "He was an athlete, not a household name. And by the way, this is not rare. Athletes have been arrested for trafficking. Former athletes have been arrested for trafficking. I'm not trying to dog out athletes, but this is not rare," she said. You start dating this person, I asked. On and off. So this is where the story goes into, she started dating this guy, and when she was dating him, she says she was getting trafficked. She alludes to being forced into prostitution. And when Shane is asking, like, oh, how was it? Were you, like, physically forced with violence or anything like that? She just kind of says she was manipulated or groomed. A woman in her early 30s, forced into prostitution after meeting some guy outside of the strip club she was willingly working in. Like, she was willingly working the strip club, doing lap dances and stuff like that. But no, when it came to prostitution, that was trafficking. I was never in chains. I kept trying to leave the relationship. I kept trying to leave the lifestyle. I kept trying to leave everything I wanted to leave. I didn't understand what was happening. I still didn't have the language or the definition that what was happening was trafficking. I was being forced to be with clientele. How's the force happen? Are there threats, I asked. We know where you live, she said he'd say. And that's coming from this boyfriend? Yes. It's like she takes like the tropes and stuff like that from movies and books and what have you, where she tries to say, my boyfriend told me I know where you live. Everybody's boyfriend or girlfriend, significant other, whatever, they all know where they live because they're dating. Eliza just doesn't want to admit that she was a willing prostitute. I'm sorry, I don't believe she was trafficked. Not one bit. I think she was a in the early 2010s, and now she just regrets her decision of willingly engaging in prostitution. But regret isn't trafficking. Eliza also goes on to address the Daily Beast article where friends and former acquaintance of her spoke up and basically said that Eliza's story, like she's really embellishing it if there's any semblance of truth to what she says. And now Eliza is going out and saying in this piece written by Shane Cashman, she's saying like, hey, these people didn't know me. Look, this was a large chunk of my 30s. So when the people in the Daily Beast article said like, she never said anything about being trafficked when I saw her in 2011, first of all, I wasn't being trafficked at that point. And second of all, I didn't even know what to call what was happening to me until I escaped the first time. And this second experience happened to me after someone like Wenzel didn't even really know me. She has no context. I'm 41. They didn't know anything about when I became a survivor advocate in private. And this is where the alarm should start going off, because if you guys don't know, I've got receipts. Back a couple years ago when Eliza was on the Tough Love podcast, she never alluded to being trafficked for a large chunk or a majority of her 30s. She claimed while providing ambiguous dates and times of this alleged trafficking experience, she said it all ended sometime around her early 30s.
Was moving my stuff out of the apartment while I was at work in the middle of the night. And I kept thinking like, oh my gosh, I can't believe these people are for real. I can't believe that somebody cares this much about me and about my life. I kept thinking that this might be a joke. It might be a setup. And I just couldn't believe that anybody was that nice. And they were that legit. They were that nice. And I owe them quite a bit. And I ended up going to a safe house. I was literally like whisked away.
How many years at this point, how many years had passed since your first trip to LA?
Whew, that's a really good question. I'd have to do the math. My first trip to LA, originally I was 16. And this day that I'm talking about, I was already in my 30s. Early 30s. I might have been 30, but I'd have to really go back and look.
Now, in the Shane Cashman article, Eliza also claims that even though she was being trafficked by this mysterious Chicago man that she started dating after meeting him outside of the strip club, she claims that she spent like a couple of months with Eve's Angels and then like took a Greyhound to go back to the trafficker in Chicago. You're done with the boyfriend after this, I asked. No, I took a Greyhound back to Chicago, she said. This was a few months later. Did you bounce from the safe house secretly? I missed him. Even though I was in this place with all the love and food and new friends, it was a beautiful environment. It looks a lot like this, she said, pointing out the window at the vast landscape. Towards the end of this abhorrent article by Shane Cashman, not only does Eliza Bleu present herself as like the biggest piece of shit, but Shane Cashman also demonstrates that he's a piece of shit as well, because both of them, both Shane, both Eliza, just basically were on critics and content creators alike, with Eliza spinning up this just fantasy story about how the World Star Hip Hop video was private even though it wasn't. And then Shane Cashman on a critic, on content creators by calling people like me like pawns and idiots and what have you. Shane Cashman wrote, "At the rate I was personally getting attacked online for injecting myself into the story, I started to think that even if Eliza was a total liar, if she somehow schemed up this wild and elaborate lie that would have taken years to plan, it didn't warrant the level of attack on her, nor anyone in her surroundings." Are you kidding me? So you're saying even if she completely fabricated being a sex trafficking victim, thereby appropriating the stories and trauma of real victims, you think she doesn't deserve criticism? What kind of piece of is Shane Cashman? This is when I started to realize that a lot of the people making the most noise about Eliza's story were truly the useful idiots. They became tools of destruction, rooted in absolute ignorance and disguised as moral authority. We have encountered a gang of leeches here that suck at the skin of a machine they can't comprehend the full scope of, because they are so lost in their own narcissism. Or perhaps even worse, they are conscious of a symbiosis between them and the destruction orgy, carrying torches and pitchforks and masquerading through the internet. Our perpetual trauma machine. These people are digital cannibals. They care more about their names getting lumped into stories the same way tumors grow in a body. They worship fame. This cuck is interviewing Eliza Bleu and has the audacity and the balls to call other content creators and people who are adversely affected by Eliza's shenanigans, call them and people like me fame. I can't stress this enough. Shane Cashman's credibility is completely shot. It's and he's a piece of. And if you still don't believe that he's a piece of based upon this article, he addresses the elephant in the room that everybody was wondering, if he was going to reach out for comment for the content creators that were silenced by Eliza's bullshit. Spoiler alert, he's not. I realized at this point that it wasn't even worth it to seek quotes from these people because they merely exist in the distant margins of this entire story. But in their narcissism, they see themselves at the center of the story. These content creators, who live stream for hours and hours every day about Eliza, had also already said everything they had to say. They will probably read this and continue to speak out of both sides of their mouths, saying they don't want a war, but also insidiously antagonizing their audience to believe they have a firm handle on this whole situation. Call me crazy, but I think content creators, particularly like Brittany Venti and The Quartering and other people, they rightly do get to insert themselves at the center of the story because they were censored, they were deplatformed, removed off Twitter, stuff like that. All at the order and behest of Eliza Bleu. No matter how she spins that story, that video from World Star Hip Hop, it wasn't private. When Brittany Venti shared that screenshot, it was 100% fair use, and it wasn't private. And for Eliza Bleu to have said in this article that these people should have reached out to me first, Brittany Venti did try to reach out to her. So the shared audacity between Shane Cashman and Eliza Bleu for this latest piece, it's mind-boggling. Anyways, guys, if you haven't read this piece yet personally, if you want to, go ahead. It's long, it's boring, like I said. Like when you print this thing out, it's over 30 pages. That's how long and arduous and boring it is. But anyway, that's the long and short of it. My name's Greg Hoyt. That was The Breakdown. Peace.